You are listening to the Prosper Law Podcast. Learn how to reduce stress, have more time, and make more money. Come on in.
I'm Greg McCollum, and I built a seven-figure criminal defense law firm. I formed Prosper Law to show criminal defense law firm owners who are desperate for success how to grow from under $200,000 to $1 million and beyond.
You are listening to the Prosper Law Podcast. Learn how to reduce stress, have more time, and make more money. Come on in.
I'm Greg McCollum, and I built a seven-figure criminal defense law firm. I formed Prosper Law to show criminal defense law firm owners who are desperate for success how to grow from under $200,000 to $1 million and beyond. Hi, I'm Greg McCollum here again with another edition of Prosper Law Podcast. Today, our topic is, or what I want to talk about, is A, B, C, D, and F employees. The idea is, in any company, certainly in your law firm, what you want to have is you want to have A players and B players. You want to move out anything below that. The C players are bad for your law firm. They're bad for your business. And I'll get into what a C player is a little bit. Because the C players attract more C players, whereas A players attract A players. And I heard this a long time, and I think maybe everybody hears you need A players. If you want to be successful, you need a good mix of A players on your team. You need A players and B players. And if you listen to anybody that's successful in any kind of business, anybody that's hyper successful, very successful, they all talk about this. People that have built, billion-dollar companies, people who have built Fortune 500 companies, people who have written books about it, and some of the best business books ever written that people read and look at, they all talk about this. If you look at successful companies outside of law firms, and you look at law firms, if you talk to somebody that's running a multi-8-figure law firm, if you're at a seminar or something, they're going to talk about this. Now, interestingly, many years ago, I would hear this and think, yeah, you need good people, you need A players. And so I went around telling others that, yeah, I got A players. My people are great. And I told myself that because I really never had anything to compare them to, because I had C players and D players, basically. And so, because you can't do everything, when you have C and D players, and it's especially true for lawyers, because you're a lawyer, because you've been trained, because you want everything right, because you want everything done right, because you want everything perfect, just lawyers in general, are micromanagers. And I certainly know I was. And, it's the old saying, if you want something done right, do it yourself. And I think lawyers succumb to that every day. I think everybody in their law practices are doing this. And it's one of the reasons that they're worn out and burned out, and things are just a problem. They're just it's just not a good setup for people. But there is a solution, and one of the solutions is look for and hire A players and B players. So if you've never heard this before, and I'll give you some basic definitions. Now, you can Google this, you can search this. And you'll find a lot of stuff about it where someone will talk for or write, 7 paragraphs or more about A players and characteristics of B players and C players. Excuse me. So there's a lot of information out there that I don't have time to go through in all of this. If we were at a seminar or something like that and I had more time and the seminar was focused on that, then we could do a much deeper dive. So the basics are, do you have any A's? Do you have any A players? And know that if you have some A players attract A players. C players attract C players. If you have a C player, they don't want any A players on the team. They don't really probably want any B players. They want everybody down at their level so nobody is outshining them and they're making the work look difficult and they're doing all this work and they're doing so well for you. It's also a characteristic of a D player, which is really a manipulating person who's also kind of a saboteur ultimately. So A player, what's an A player? An A player learns, adjusts, and tries again until they succeed. They're trying. They care. They learn and adjust and grow. B players typically produce at or above expectations consistently. So your B players are consistent. They're doing their job. They have some standards for themselves that they're going to follow. So they want to do a good job. They want to make a B, all right? They're not doing it. They don't want an A plus, 100 plus extra credit, get better and better, but they're just going to produce, at or above expectations. Sometimes they'll surprise you and they'll go over and beyond, and you'll think, oh, wow, this is a great person. And they are great because you need a mix of A's and B's. If you have all A's, then you've got too much excellence because somebody has to do the work. Somebody has to do the tasks. And so the A's always have ideas. They're always trying to improve everything. They want to change everything. They want to be great. And so they want to make you great because they want to be a part of greatness. And it's easy to really see this, in the sports analogies. Sports is a great analogy or allegory for business. And it's easier to understand. Like, let's say you're a college football fan and your football team is something like Ohio State, okay, or Alabama or Georgia or something like that. So if you're really a football fan, you follow that recruiting and you see, oh wow, we got a 5-star player, which is the elite of the elite, the elite of the elite. And you're so excited. And when you follow that stuff, and I know a lot of people do, what you'll hear a lot of these elite 5-stars talk about is they're excited to play with these other elite players. They don't want to play with average players. They may not sign with your team to play for that college football team if you don't have some people around them that match their elite skill and ability, because they want to shine, they want to excel, they want to win a national championship, and they want to develop and become an NFL player. They want to come out of college with a $80 million contract or whatever to play in the NFL. That's all their dreams. So if you look at it, they talk about it. And many times you'll see players that chose, maybe they went to Ohio State, and they'll say because they've got this player, and that's I want to play with them. So C players, what's a C player? I go through the longest, definition here with the C player because that's what everybody has. And so it's important to recognize what is a C player. The C player, they generally underperform. Their job is too hard. They're doing the best they can. They blame other people. If something doesn't go right, they've got an excuse, and they blame somebody else on your team or somebody outside your company. That's why I couldn't do it. That's what went wrong. So their work performance is just barely acceptable. Their work performance is barely acceptable. They generally underperform. They lack ambition. They just lack ambition. And if you're ambitious, it's really more of a conflict or problem for them than anything else, because if you're trying to go to a higher level, that's going to put stress on them. That's going to cause them, in their mind, to have to work harder. They don't want to work harder. They just want to kind of cruise through and do the minimum to keep their job, but then they get a raise because I'm doing my job. A year went by, so I should get a raise. They blame their mistakes on others. They avoid learning new things. They don't really want to learn anything because everything they look at is, oh, that's just more work. That's just more work for me. That's not something that I want to do. You come back, you go to a seminar, you come back with your great ideas, you're excited. You tell them we're going to start doing this, and they just groan. That's it. That's their take. And then ultimately, they end up hindering the productivity of other people. And A players do not want to work with C players. And if you're lucky enough or fortunate enough or smart enough to have gotten an A player, and then you've got a couple of C's knocking about, if you don't do something at some point over time, the A is going to leave. Because the A cannot tolerate the C's. The A wants another A player. The A wants another elite athlete to play on the team. The A's want to do something good. The A's want to get better every year. They want the company to get better. They want to work for a coach, play for a coach, or work for a business owner that they respect, that encourages them to go out and solve problems, handle things the right way, meet and exceed expectations. So the conflict between the C's and the A's is very real. Now, before, I thought I had A's, and it's, I guess, in my defense, you couldn't really expect me, or I couldn't expect myself to know I really didn't have any A players because I never had one. So I didn't know what they were. I thought my people were good because I didn't understand any of this, and my expectations were so low that I figured if they just came to work and didn't call in sick, that they were good, and if they could do their job and produce, they were A players. But they weren't, and this held me back for years because I just didn't know this. Now, if you research this stuff, you'll find out a ton about A players because it's kind of, I think, if once you understand what an A player is, then you kind of understand that anybody less than an A player is a B or a C. In the research that I've done, I've not really found anything about D and F players. And I think maybe that might have been a creation of one of my former coaches who was terrific, who talked about this. But when I learned about D players, I started to realize that I had one. And the D players, they're smart. They know what to say. They can do the work. They could do the work, but really their time and energy is really spent around making themselves look good, protecting themselves, even trying to shape the work environment in the way that if this D player finds out you're interviewing somebody who they know is an A player, because these people stand out, they're probably going to subtly, in a way even that made you question yourself or made you think they're right, discourage you from hiring the A player. Because they don't want any A players in there, because that's going to expose them. And they've got their world kind of set up where they can do what they want to do. They know the right things to say to you. They know the right way to act. They will say things about somebody else in their life would say something like, does your boss really appreciate how much you do? Does your boss really appreciate all the things you do, all the extra effort you put in, and things like that? But at the same time, then maybe they're out of work, they're not coming to work, but then they do something calculated, really, at a certain time, which is maybe it's after hours. Maybe they go to the office to fix something, to rescue a problem, and so you think this person's extraordinary. But really, the D players are the hardest to spot, because they look good, they sound good, they're smart, they understand what you're talking about. They're just not on board. They're running their own program, and finding these people and weeding them out is very difficult. But know they're there. If you have a small law firm and you have, one employee or two employees or even three or four, maybe you don't have a D employee, and I hope you don't, because D employees really ultimately are saboteurs. They really don't want you to succeed. They just want to keep their kind of circumstances the same, which serves them, is comfortable for them. Now, F players are easy. You don't have any F players, because an F player will just explode. An F player doesn't have the ability or the skill set or the emotional intelligence to contain themselves. You're stupid, you're effed up, and they're going to tell you. And I had this circumstance where I had a lawyer who I thought was terrific. Anytime I asked him to do something, and this is the very first associate I ever hired, and I thought he was diligent and ambitious and just a great, soldier. And I would ask him to do something, and he would say, "I'm on it." And I love that. But then one day, we'd actually hired a new office manager, and it was her first day. And we were all in the conference room. It was her first staff meeting. And I had said something, and it wasn't even really related to work, and he told me to F off. Just F off, Greg. And I'm not saying the word. I know how to say the word, but I want to keep this podcast, at least for now, not explicit. I know that when I would listen to things on the radio, some of my favorite coaches, I'd have my little girls in the car. I'm like, why do they have to talk like that? I want to listen to this, but they're 7 years old. Come on. So anyway, that's why I'm saying it. I know how to say it. If you want to talk to me personally, I can talk like anybody. So he tells me, just go F yourself. And I was like Arnold Schwarzenegger in True Lies. I'm sitting there, my heart's pounding. I'm envisioning like Arnold Schwarzenegger with the car salesman. I'm envisioning like bashing his face into the dash. But then it cuts back to Arnold. He's just sitting there like with that Arnold smile. So that's what I'm doing in the conference room. He gets up and leaves. My heart's pounding. My heart's racing. I go in the other room and tell him, get your stuff. give her your keys, give her your magnet key for the building, do this, and leave. Well, he was leaving anyway. I didn't fire him. He quit. Okay, so whatever. So that's an F. You'll know you have an F because they'll explode. Now, in that situation, they're really kind of doing you a favor because you don't have to weed them out. They just blow up and they're gone. So that's good. And if that happens, it happens. But it's not something you have to spend any time on because you'll know it if somebody's screaming at you and yelling at you. That's an F. The D's, hardest to figure out. The C's and the B's and the A's, once you start to kind of get into the understanding of these definitions, then the fog will start to clear a little bit. To some people, it's obvious. I'm always amazed at people that just have this spot-on judge of character. I really don't have that. That's not something that it's probably a flaw of mine. It's certainly not a strength because I've lived my whole life trying to be accepting of people and not be critical of people and try to understand that most people are, quote, doing the best they can, and so that limits my ability to use discretion. It dulls my filters. Whereas some people can meet somebody, talk to them for 5 minutes, and know exactly what they're all about. Maybe I'll develop that skill set, but I certainly don't have it. So in terms of looking at these people, once you become aware that there are A players, B players, and C players, and I know you got the C's. Hope you probably, if you're doing okay, you probably have some B's. And you might even have an A. And if you have an A, then you have to start making sure that the way you run this law firm, you're in the process of eliminating the C's. Now, you don't have to do it. If you listen to this podcast, you don't have to go back to the office and do it that minute, though that may be the right thing to do. But to become aware, maybe get some feedback from other people that just know you and know the people in your law firm, even in employee evaluation meetings. Ask somebody you trust. Ultimately, what you should do is you should have clear, concise job descriptions, and you should have performance review, and you should have the projects that people are assigned, and then you'll get clarity that way. Because the C's, they cannot get their project done. There's no way, because they're overworked. They're doing the best they can. This happened. So you'll see that in the performance review. You'll see that this person just can't do anything extra, and they'll be exposed that way. In terms of A players, we all know about Morgan & Morgan. We all know about John Morgan. And I read John Morgan's book, You Can't Teach Hungry. I don't know how long ago. It seems maybe 5 years ago, maybe longer. I'm not sure when it came out. And love him or hate him, John Morgan has the largest, most successful law firm in the United States. So in the area of personal injury, he's scaled more, he's expanded more, he's managed more than anybody, and there's nobody even close. And I've been to seminars and I've heard John Morgan speak, and one of the things that struck me about him, because for this one seminar, I remember it was during COVID, and the people wanted to get him, on the stage and to be there, and to track him down. They found out that he was living in Maui, in Hawaii, in his house, his whatever he has there in Maui, and he didn't have a laptop, so he couldn't be on. I think it was a podcast. He couldn't be on the podcast because he didn't have a laptop. So I think they FedExed a laptop to him so he could be on the podcast. But he's sitting in Maui, at that time already running the largest, most successful personal injury law firm in America, and he's running it on an iPad. He's got everything that he needs on that iPad. Now, John Morgan has A players. Maybe there's some C's in there because there's so many employees and they haven't been weeded out yet. But John Morgan was talking about people, because when you talk about somebody that's so successful, and I remember one time I was talking to my friend Ken Hardison, who owns Pilma, which is a fantastic coaching company. I've been in Pilma masterminds. I go to Pilma every year. Ken Hardison's a friend of mine. We live in the same town. And Ken Hardison said, when I was talking to him about getting things done, he said, I think more who than what. So I think who's going to do it versus what needs to get done. He knows what he wants to get done, so he thinks who can do this, whether it's an employee, whether it's a vendor, whatever it is. Who's going to do this? And John Morgan, the thing that John Morgan said, which I found fascinating, is John Morgan talked about his most key employees, his most key players at Morgan & Morgan. He said that he called them send, delete. Send, delete, which meant that he would send them an email telling them what he wanted. He would send an email asking for the thing that he wanted accomplished and done, and he would send it to them and delete it. And he called them send, delete team players, send, delete people that work for him. Because once he sent it, he could delete it. Because all he had to do was let them know what it is he wanted them to do or accomplish. Send, delete. So, do you have any send, delete players? Do you have any send, delete employees? And I know a lot of people, even I kind of struggle with this whole thing, is maybe breaking out in hives thinking, that's crazy. You've got to have follow-up. You can't just expect people they're going to do this and know how to do it and do it the right way and do it on time. That's impossible. The reason you think it's impossible is because you don't have any send, delete players. The reason you think that's impossible is because you don't have any A players. If when I said that, you thought through who on my team could I rely on to send, delete. If there's somebody that comes to mind, that's your A player. If no one comes to mind, you don't have an A player. And even when John Morgan said this and I heard it, I thought, well, that's crazy. That's crazy. You can't just delete it. What if it doesn't get done? But then I realized the send, delete person, if they can't get over the obstacles, because they're going to have obstacles, they're going to have problems. It's not going to go smoothly. Nothing ever does. But they're going to run through it and adapt and change and stay persistent like a superhero in an action movie, okay? That's what they're going to do. And if somehow they couldn't do it, they couldn't get it done, guess what? They're going to send John Morgan an email, or they're going to call him, because they're going to get it done. If they can't get it done, they're going to tell him, I'm having problems. I've done everything. I can't get it done. So they're coming back because they're send, delete. They're super A players. They're the best there are. And to be successful, to grow, to have less stress, to make your life better, to better serve your law firm clients, you've got to have some good people. And so think about it. Do you have any A's? Do you have any C's? Do you have any D's? Do you have any send, deletes? Because if you want to be successful, you cannot do it all yourself. Think who, not what. Go back and look at your staff and think about who you've hired and try to determine and become aware of who's working for you. If you want to know more, go to prosperitlaw.com. We show criminal defense law firm owners how to reduce stress, have more free time, and make more money. Thanks for listening.